Hey guys, it's Chris. From a deadly bear attack to the cyclist who was literally hunted, plus some crazy accidents you won't believe actually happened. Here are 10 times biking went horribly wrong. Number 10. Cyclist and the bear. Two friends, James and Alex, were biking down a gravel road in the country near Anchorage, Alaska, when out of nowhere, a grizzly bear broke through the trees, grabbed a hold of James, and pulled him right off his bike. According to both men, the bear rushed about 30 yards out of its way just to grab the cyclist. James screamed for help as the bear tried to pull him off into the woods, biting and clawing, trying to tear the poor guy to pieces. The whole incident only lasted about 10 seconds, and the only reason James even lived is because his friend Alex knew exactly what to do and acted quickly. James managed to pull his bear spray out, get between his friend and the angry animal, and empty the whole can of spray into that grizzly bear's face. The bear was so angry that it took off and ran back into the forest, but the ordeal wasn't over just yet. James was in serious trouble. He was bleeding profusely from his neck. His friend managed to call for help, and luckily there was a nearby base. Rescuers arrived on the scene quickly and took James to the Providence, Alaska Medical Center, where he made a full recovery. He now credits his friend with literally saving his life. Number 9. Rampaging truck driver. In Arizona, one of the most shocking vehicle-on-cyclist crimes took place during the Show Low Cities road race. It was about as dramatic and as horrifying as it gets. A truck driver plowed through a crowd of cyclists, critically injuring 6 people before just driving away. It was a hit and run, and it actually ended with the black Ford truck driver being shot by the police through his driver's side window. 2 of the injured were in stable condition at the time, but the other 4 were listed as critical. The truck driver himself was also in stable condition after the cops took him out using force. Imagine being in a car chase and shooting through the windows. But the whole ordeal was pretty intense. According to the Show Low Police Sergeant Brandon Clark, the truck veered across the road at high speed to collide with the cyclist for a reason unknown to literally everybody. There were about 50 cyclists in the lane, so it's not like he didn't see them. He most likely committed this horrendous act on purpose, though nobody has been able to say why. After all, what kind of sick motivation could a person have for plowing down innocent cyclists in the middle of a race? Number 8. Beat the bridge. A guy on a motorcycle made the wrong call in Miami. We've all tried to make the yellow light, but this guy took it a step further by trying to make the drawbridge. He ignored the warning signs and tried to race over the drawbridge before it could open. It happened at about 6 in the morning as the guy went on his morning ride from Aventura to Key Biscayne. The bridge was slowly opening over the Miami River. The cyclist, later identified as 58-year-old Fred Medina, thought he was in a Mission Impossible movie or something as he tried to fling himself and his bicycle over the widening gap. Since his name wasn't Tom Cruise, he didn't make it. He slid down the drawbridge as it opened and fell to his death. Medina's friend Stephen Tannenbaum, who spoke with WSVN, said Medina had been biking with another friend who had crossed the bridge ahead of him. He slid down the bridge and fell in between the section of the bridge that moves and the fixed part of the roadway. According to ABC News, the Downtown Development Authority has been trying to get gates installed that would block people from attempting these kinds of dangerous stunts, but it just hasn't been done yet. But to be quite honest, it really was his own fault for ignoring the very obvious signs that the bridge was opening. Sometimes it's just better to be late for work. Number 7. Deer crash. A cyclist was going about 40 miles an hour along a rural road near Mount Lemmon just outside Tucson when he crashed. But he didn't crash into the back of a car or slide into a ditch. Instead, the cyclist had a head-on collision with a wild deer. Luckily for all of us on the internet, he caught the entire thing on video thanks to his helmet camera. He smacked into that deer, flipped all the way over his handlebars, and then landed pretty well on his head. According to the cyclist himself, Reed Chonell, he was in significant pain but didn't see any reason to call an ambulance. And miraculously, he and the deer both walked away without any serious injuries. His bicycle was shattered, though, unfortunately, and he had a broken foot and a bit of a road rash, but it was probably the most dramatic cycling video that he'll ever make. So have you ever been biking down the road or even driving and had to stop for a deer? Or was it just too late? Let us know in the comments below, and if you're liking this video, then be sure to hit that thumbs up and the subscribe buttons if you haven't already. Number 6. The deadly buzzard. Yet another cyclist caught an exceptional one-of-a-kind event with his helmet camera after an unexpected encounter with a wild and deadly animal. It wasn't a bear, and it wasn't a deer, and it wasn't even something you would probably expect. 39-year-old husband and father Alex Gilbert was riding his bicycle when he felt something hit his head, and he thought he'd been whacked by a tree branch. Apparently, a giant buzzard was flying above him and had mistook the camera mounted to his helmet as some kind of snack and tried to take it away with its sharp claws. At the time of the incident, Alex didn't really know what happened. It wasn't until he got home and inspected himself that he realized he had a wound on the back of his head that looked like something had scratched him. Then when he checked the footage from his camera, he saw the amazing close-up of the buzzard and realized it must have nicked his head with its talons. Alex figured the bird probably thought his camera was a rodent, but it was sorely mistaken. He said the buzzard shot off like a missile and added, "They're such quiet and majestic things. Before I realized what had happened, it was already over." Alex's injury wasn't serious, and it honestly could have been a lot worse. At least he got some great footage out of that surprising ordeal. Number 5, the red light. In East London, a 73-year-old man was crossing the road, but he never actually made it to the other side. He was left bleeding on the crosswalk after a cyclist ran the red light and killed him. This dramatic incident has resulted in the cyclist, a 23-year-old named Ermir Loka, being accused of manslaughter. He's also being accused of furious driving, a crime most people probably didn't even know existed. According to the BBC, the cyclist was going about 15 miles per hour when he collided with the senior citizen. The older man was simply on his way home from working a long day at a hospital. The prosecutor in the case said that Ermir was cycling very hard and had overtaken other people on the road and fully intended to run straight through that red light. It wasn't even a fresh red light, it was stale. Red for at least 5 seconds. And here's where the real horror comes in. If it had been an accident, okay, but instead of helping the old man as he bled to death, Ermir picked up his bike and cycled away. He didn't even call an ambulance or stick around to see if the guy was still breathing. The victim suffered skull damage, fractures, and sadly he died 8 days later from severe brain trauma. Number 4, the last race. Pro cyclist Robert de Grief was participating in a single-day race in the Netherlands when the unimaginable happened. This guy was only 27 years old and in peak pristine physical condition. He was also an amazing athlete and had actually placed second at the Ron van Drenthe race just the previous month. It's also important to note that he had taken a heart exam recently that came back negative for any issues or abnormalities. And yet halfway through the race, Robert suffered from a heart attack. This is not something most cyclists expect to happen, especially young ones. After all, people in such great physical health normally have really strong hearts. Suffering the heart attack was only the first of Robert's problems, though. He had to be induced into a coma for 48 hours, and then he spent 3 weeks in critical condition before eventually dying from a brain hemorrhage. It's not clear really what exactly happened to Robert. There was nothing obvious that could have caused such medical complications. It was just one of those freak things. Robert was pedaling away one second and the next he was on his back dying. This isn't even the very first case of a promising young cyclist having an unexpected heart attack. A 15-year-old British cyclocross champion named Charlie Craig suffered cardiac arrest in January of 2017. The doctors believe was caused by a condition known as silent ischemia, aka a lack of oxygen to the heart. This can occur during intense training via high surges of adrenaline, even for well-trained athletes. This really goes to show that even if you take care of yourself and practice a healthy and active lifestyle, you can still die of a heart attack before even hitting 30. Number 3, kamikaze squirrel. In Chicago, a squirrel got some serious revenge on a city official. It happened after Alderman Howard Brookins gave a heated speech at City Council about how the squirrels in Chicago were being too aggressive and had turned into a menace. Well, apparently those squirrels in Chicago don't like being called out, because just weeks after the alderman basically called out every single squirrel in the city, one of them got its revenge. The alderman was cycling the Calsag Trail when a squirrel dive-bombed his bicycle from a tree branch. It was a kamikaze squirrel. It wedged itself between the spokes of his bike and caused the alderman to fly over his handlebars and seriously injure himself. There hasn't been a kamikaze attack this effective since Pearl Harbor, with the alderman suffering a broken nose and a fractured skull, and having about 6 of his teeth knocked out of his face. He actually had to get emergency surgery, and all because he made the grave error of bad-mouthing the city's squirrels. I wonder if now he'll just leave them be, or maybe counterattack. Number 2, the hunted. In the French Alps, cycling can be a dangerous game. This is especially true during hunting season. A 24-year-old man named Lucas Cleric was recently jailed and sentenced to 4 years in prison for manslaughter after he accidentally shot and killed a mountain biker from Wales. Why did the hunter shoot the innocent mountain biker? Well, according to the BBC, Lucas mistook the man for a wild boar while he was biking through the French forest. In addition to being sent to jail, Lucas was also banned from hunting, banned from ever owning a weapon again, and just generally disgraced. What makes this story really shocking is that the forest in which the attack occurred is a known destination for mountain bikers. It's a popular area and people come from all over the world to bike here, and the locals know it. Plus, how does a person mistake a human on a pair of wheels for a wild boar? And why was he hunting in an area that cyclists are frequently in? These are the reasons why the hunter got such a serious sentence, even though the shooting was a so-called accident. Do you think this guy really thought that biker was a wild boar? Number 1. Mauled by a cougar. In the outskirts of Seattle, a man named S.J. Brooks met an early death after going for an ordinary bike ride with his friend. They were on a remote trail near North Bend and everything seemed completely normal. And then out of nowhere, a cougar pounced. The two cyclists got off their bikes and tried to scare the animal away. They made noise and hit the giant cat with their bicycle wheels. It was a success and the cougar left them alone. But it came back for revenge. Just when the cyclist thought the cougar was gone for good, it made a shocking surprise attack. It first attacked Mr. Brooks's friend, sticking his whole head in its mouth. And for those who don't know, a cougar has such an incredibly strong bite force that it can, when it wants to, literally crush a human head with its powerful jaws. Mr. Brooks acted fast and distracted the animal before it could crush his friend to death, but then the cougar turned on him, while his friend ran off shouting for help. The friend eventually managed to get through to emergency services, but by the time they returned to the scene of the accident, Mr. Brooks was gone. He was found later that day, dragged and half-eaten by the cougar. The friend of Mr. Brooks was able to survive the incident, and all because of Mr. Brooks's great sacrifice. Thanks for watching. So what's the worst thing that's ever happened to you while cycling? Let me know in the comments. And if you've liked this video, be sure to hit subscribe and then come back again for more wild content. We'll see you next time.